Okay, well, I'm going to talk slowly as we get the meeting started here today. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and we are here today to talk about a proposed air permit for Graphic Packaging International LLC in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I have some housekeeping things to talk to you about. But before we go into those sort of logistics of how the meeting is going to work tonight, we do have our permit decision maker here with us today. Her name is Marianne Dolahanty, and she is our Air Quality Division Director. So I'm actually just going to turn it over to her really briefly so she can welcome all of you guys to the meeting. So Marianne, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. First of all, I'd like to personally thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to participate with us in this information session and public hearing. Public participation is very important to Eagle and the Air Quality Division. It's a vital way for us to work towards Eagle's mission of protecting public health and the environment. Public participation also creates avenues for conversations as well as discussion on the proposed permit changes at Graphics Packaging. The draft permit that you have before you tonight and will be deciding on is written with the public and the environment in mind. So we appreciate your flexibility participating with us virtually. We do understand that folks are living in some challenging times right now, and those challenges vary from person to person, family to family, and that this method of public participation is relatively new and not perfect. We're continuing to look for ways to improve the process and value your input. So I'll be listening in tonight so that my decision on the proposed permit keeps you, your comments, and your concerns in mind. Again, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And at this time, Jennifer, I will turn things back to you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to get into some logistics, but first I want to introduce you all to the staff that we have here today. So part of the night tonight, as we kind of go through things, is going to be an opportunity to do a question and answer with our staff. And it's not just Eagle staff that we have here tonight, but we do have a representative from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services as well. So I have had the panelists keep their cameras on. You've already met Marianne, so that's good. You've met me. We also have Monica Brothers here. She is the inspector for the facility there in Kalamazoo, and she's going to be speaking a little bit tonight during the presentation portion. You're also going to hear primarily from Ambrosia Brown. She is our permit engineer on the proposed permit today. I also have Steph Hangspa. She is our air modeling person, so she can answer some questions about that. And if you don't know what air modeling is, we can definitely fill you in on that as well. I have Keisha Williams. She's a toxicologist with Eagle, and she can answer questions related to that. I also have Susan Kilmer. She works in our air monitoring unit, so it's different than modeling. Those are a little different, sometimes related, but different. So she'll be able to answer questions about some of our air monitoring that we do in the area. And then I also have Bill Farrell, and he's our representative from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services with us tonight. And then one other person that I don't want to forget to introduce is Matt Tomlinson, and he's going to be helping me on the back side of everything when we get to the question and answer part. So panelists, if you guys want to go ahead and turn your cameras off, except for you, Amber, because I'm going to be passing it over to you in a minute here. So the way we're going to do the evening tonight is going to be a little different than our in-person meetings. I know there was some folks probably that are online now that were at our last in-person meeting that we had there in Kalamazoo in the spring. So we're going to run it kind of the same way. So we're going to do an information session. That information session is comported of a short presentation that Amber and Monica are going to give that are going to talk about the proposed permit, some of the issues that we know folks have concerns with at the facility and related to the facility. Once we get done with that part, we're going to open it up to a question and answer session. And I'll tell you how to ask questions. I always say answer, I don't know why. Ask questions when we get to that part as well. And then we're going to go into the public hearing. So I want to be really clear about this. The public hearing itself is an opportunity for residents, community members, sometimes the company, various people to present comments on the record for the decision maker. So you guys met Mary Ann, for her to consider when we're deciding if we're going to go ahead and grant this permit as written, make changes to the draft permit before we issue it, or deny the permit. So those are really important. The difference between our question and answer session and the public hearing session is during the Q&A, we'll be responding back to your questions that you have. Once we start the comment period, you will be allowed to make comments on the record, but we won't be responding to those comments. Those are strictly just for you to be able to put those comments on the record. I don't want anyone to stress out about that. This is not your only opportunity to make comments on the record. So if you're not prepared to do so tonight, that's completely okay. We have plenty of time after this hearing is over to the end of the comment period for you to make verbal comments via voicemail. We actually have a voicemail phone number that you can call and leave a verbal comment just like you would tonight. And then there's other ways to submit written comments. So we can talk a little bit about those ways later, but I just want to be very clear that the question and answer period will go from the end of the information session, the presentation, up until 7 o'clock, or when you guys are done asking questions, whichever comes first. So if we get to 7 o'clock and we may still have some questions we didn't get to, we'll try to get to those to you one-on-one after the meeting is over tonight, later on this week or early next week. So just want to make that clear that the public hearing will start at 7 o'clock. After we get done with the hearing, I will go over other ways that you can submit an official comment on the record. We'll talk a little bit about where you can find other information about this project if you are interested in that. And I will give you the contact information from the folks on the panel tonight in case you would like to contact them with more questions. Okay, so that was a long-winded speech I just gave you all. So what I want to tell you next is that your lines are going to be muted and that we are recording this meeting. So what we'll do after the meeting is over is we take the recording and we do get it closed captioned if we have any folks that would need that. The closed captioning, once it's posted on YouTube, you can, if you know someone that has English as a second language or is interested in a translated version of that, you can look at translated closed captions in YouTube as well. So we'll share all of that information, those links and everything with everyone who attended the meeting tonight after the meeting. So getting to how to ask a question, and I'm telling you this now as the presentation is going to get started, because what you may want to do is, as we're kind of talking about things, if a question pops up, just go ahead and type that in that Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. And like I said, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can before we actually start the public hearing. So because we had some weird technical difficulties, I have to go ahead and I'm going to share a different screen with everyone here. So just give me a moment to kind of pop this over. And I apologize for that. Sometimes it's so go the best laid plans on this, but Amber, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to you. So if you wanna just, I think I know when you are going to want to change slides over, but if you wanna just let me know if I don't follow along properly, that would be great. But you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Just go. Okay. First, I want to thank everyone for coming. It's really exciting that there's this many people who want to know what's going on in air permitting and in their community. So thank you for attending this informational session. My name is Ambrosia Brown, or you can call me Amber for short. I work for the Air Quality Division, or AQD, we call ourselves. I am the lead engineer for the proposed permitting action, who is reviewing the application. But I'm not the only person who worked on this in the Air Quality Division. I am one of many staff that were involved. So I am going to lead this discussion. And first I'm going to discuss who we are here at AQD. I'm going to talk about the scope of the proposed project, some of the review involved, and Monica, the district inspector, is also going to speak, and she's going to talk about some of the ongoing odor issues as well, which I know a lot of you are concerned about.
So Amber, before you get into this, I apologize for interrupting, but I just wanted to let you know that we do have a lot of people that have called in tonight, so they can't most likely see the slides. So just as you're going through, just be conscientious of the fact that if we're talking about looking at the slides or something like that, you want to make sure we're just identifying numbers or anything like that that people might normally be just reading.
Okay, so I'll go through more. So there's some parts that I might have just, you know, kind of skimmed over, but I might go into more detail than if people can't visually see it. Thank you for the heads up, Jennifer.
Yep, and we can also share a PDF of these slides with anybody who's provided an email address afterwards too. So we'll have other ways that folks can see this information if they need to later as well.
Okay, so the first slide, you know, we have some pictures here, and it's an intro into the Air Quality Division. So what do we do here? Well, we regulate sources of air pollutants. And as you probably know, there's a lot of places that produce potential air pollution. That could be big farms, like in the picture, gas burning in vehicles, your furnace at home, industrial sources, and also obviously places like graphic packaging. So our overall mission of the Air Quality Division is to make sure that the air we breathe is clean. And we have the authority to do this by regulating industrial sources. Thank you. So how do we do this? Well, there's different methods involved, and we have different staff that serve different functions in the process. We monitor the levels of air pollutants is one of the functions that we do. We examine toxics, air toxic contaminants to ensure that the public health is protected. We conduct inspections of industrial sources of air pollutants for compliance with rules and regulations that are in place to ensure public health. And we review applications and write permits to meet, to show that they're going to meet those rules and regulations. And that's where I come in as a permit engineer. So the Air Quality Division has the authority to permit sources of air pollution like graphic packaging and other sources like power plants, auto assembly plants, and steel mills. And when we're looking at the permit to install applications, we are looking strictly at the project they're proposing to do. We do not have the authority to cover things like zoning. So if you are concerned about, you know, residences being very close to a facility, or if you're concerned about noise, that's another topic that comes up often, or traffic, you really should talk to your local authorities because we don't have the jurisdiction to control that. So why are we here today? Well, this is a public hearing as part of the permit to install process, which I'm now going to go over. So first of all, how do we start the process? Well, a company decides that they want to install equipment or make a modification. And then they determine, is this required to go through permitting? And if it does, they have to put an application together, which they then submit to the Air Quality Division. And once that is submitted, someone like me will be looking at this application. And the application includes information like how much of each pollutant are they going to emit? Do they meet all the rules and regulations in place to protect public health? And if it looks like that they are going to meet all these rules and regulations, then we draft permit conditions that we then, in this case, are going out to public comment for. And all of you, the public, can look at the documents that discuss the review we did, and you can look at the draft conditions and let us know if you have any comments. So we will review all comments, and we will respond to any comments that you submit. And once we have reviewed the comments, the Air Quality Division will make a decision on the permit. So it would be a decision to approve it as drafted. It would be a decision to approve it with modifications, or it'd be a decision to deny it. So in this case, what is a Graphic Packaging proposing to do? Well, this is really two groupings of actions. First, they're requesting facility-wide restrictions to lower the potential emissions at their facility. So this is they're requesting this so that they would be considered a minor source under certain federal regulations. The second grouping is the recycled paperboard project. Now, this was recently permitted in March 5th. However, they have requested to make some changes to it, which requires to go through permitting again. So I'm going to talk about those two items, the facility-wide emissions and the paperboard process. First, I'm going to start with the facility-wide restrictions. So these are all so-called opt-out, and I'm trying not to use that term because I know the general public might not understand what opt-out means. So I'm going to try to say facility-wide restrictions, but you know, legally and in the notice and stuff, you'll see opt-out, and that's what we're talking about. So as part of this, they're requesting to lower emission limits and take additional restrictions on type of fuel and amount of fuel they can use so that the overall facility is not subject, not considered a major source under the federal regulation that we just refer to as the PSD. So among these restrictions they're going to take, they're requesting to lower emission limits and remove fuel oil for boiler number 9. They're requesting new emission limits and fuel restrictions for the air makeup units. And they're requesting, and they are requesting, you know, restrictions on the proposed new equipment as well. So I want to make it clear that the potential emissions from that equipment that they're, you know, proposing as part of the paperboard machine project was included in the total facility-wide emissions. Now note that this part of the permitting action that we are discussing only can lower emissions, potential emissions. So there's no increases involved with this. This is strictly them asking to lower their emission limits and take additional fuel restrictions to make that enforceable. Now, the second part of the project is the recycled paperboard project. And originally I was going to kind of glance over this slide, but because Jennifer said that some people can't see it, I'm going to go ahead and go through the points. Is that, you think that's a good idea, Jennifer? Okay. So originally the paperboard project is on the left of the slide, and then we have the proposed change on the right. And this will be available for review, as Jennifer said. So the original project, the main item probably you need to pay attention to, and the result of the increase in emissions compared to last time, is a 370 million BTU per hour natural gas boiler that was originally proposed is being changed to 2 311 million BTU per hour boilers. And there are other changes. The emergency fire pump is no longer being proposed to be added. Neither is the starch cooker. They're now asking for 2 cooling towers instead of 1, and some changes to the natural gas dryers that are associated with the recycled paperboard machine. And although they did ask for fuel restrictions for boiler number 8 in the last version, in this version the fuel restrictions are even lower. And there are changes to the stacks. Stacks, for the public knowledge, is where we associate emissions to be released into the air. So it doesn't have to be a very 100-foot tall stack. It could be a vent. It could be, you know, any release point. And those can change in height, in diameter, or there could be more stacks because you have 2 cooling towers instead of 1, that kind of thing. So those are the changes that are being proposed for the recycled paperboard machine project part. Now, the paperboard machine part had associated increases and decreases as part of it. And I apologize because I tried to have table 1 of the technical fact sheet show that part of the project because I thought that's what the public would be concerned about, the part that actually had some increases associated with it. Unfortunately, it has caused some confusion. So we have become aware that there's been some inaccurate information circulating about how the proposed permit would impact emissions at Graphic Packaging on a whole based on that table. But that table, as I said, did not contain the facility-wide emissions, and it did not include like the decreases associated with the synthetic minor or like the facility-wide part that I had just talked about. So it would like not be correct to say that the facility-wide emissions are increasing by a certain percent based on that table. So I saw that is a concern. The public wanted to know, well, what is it then? And so I have created this table for public consumption to try to give you facility-wide increases and decreases. So I'm not going to go through every number in this table. I apologize for the people who are on the phone. It's just too much information, as we will have this available though, and you can see what the numbers are. But this table is based on facility-wide emissions. PTE is short for potential to emit. And so that is if a company did the maximum amount they would be allowed to do or could possibly do, that's what the emissions would be. So the PTE before the project is shown in one column. The PTE, the most they'd be allowed to do after the project, is shown in the second column. And the difference of what they would be allowed to do before and after is then also shown. And you can see the percentages on the right here that show, based on how the draft is currently written, what the increases and decreases would be. And you can see that actually most pollutants are decreasing as a result of the proposed permitting action. We're seeing 89% decrease in PM particulate. We're seeing 69% decrease for PM10. PM10 is associated with, has been shown to be associated with asthma, which I know some people have a concern in the area about that specifically, so that would be a good thing. We're also seeing 98% decrease for sulfur dioxide, that's SO2. We're seeing increases for carbon monoxide by 40%, VOC or volatile organic compounds by 20%, and greenhouse gases by 60% increase. Now, although the company had shared with me that they planned on shutting down boiler number 7 after this project, the permit did not, the draft permit did not require that. So if you look into the draft that's out to public notice, it says nothing about 7. So remember, this is potential. It's what they would be allowed to do. So the PTE after, they would still be allowed to burn 7 in boiler number 7. So no credit was given for shutting down boiler 7 on this table. However, during the public notice, the company contacted me to let me know that they're actually wanting to put in conditions now saying that they will not burn anymore. They will shut down boiler number 7. Now, if we shut down boiler number 7 and we make that part of this permitting action, the decrease, there's going to be a decrease in emissions, obviously. And so that is now shown on this extra column I put. If boiler number 7 is removed, and you can see how we're getting those decreases or even more. we're looking at 73% PM10 decrease. And the increases are also less as a result. So, for example, greenhouse gases are now 42% increase instead of the 59. So just wanted to share that information as well. So what am I talking about, right, when I say permit conditions? We use jargon all the time, right, Jennifer, that I know the public doesn't follow. So when you're looking at the draft permit and you see those numbers, 1, the permittee shall, 2, we're basically writing rules that they're needing to follow in their permit. And if they are doing what their permit says to do, they should be meeting all those rules and regulations that are in place to protect public health. So the requirements that I had written into this draft include the following. So there are going to be emission limits for the new equipment written into the draft. Production limits for the new paperboard machine were also included. The ability to burn fuel oil in existing boiler number 8 was being removed. The amount of natural gas that could be burned in 9 was being reduced, and fuel oil was also being removed for boiler number 9. And I also included a requirement for a malfunction abatement plan. For reference, a malfunction abatement plan is not a plan to have malfunctions. I know that that could be a little confusing. It's a plan in place to maintain your equipment to try to avoid having malfunctions, but if they do occur, being able to identify them quickly and doing something about them, having that plan in place to reduce the impact if it happens. So that's important. I also wrote in the emission testing would be required for the new boilers. And that part that I've talked about so far of these conditions that are newly required pertain to the paperboard machine part. But as I had previously stated, there are those restrictions, emission limits, record keeping associated with the opt-out portion or the facility-wide restrictions. And I would also add, potentially now we're looking at, based on the company's request, adding that boiler number 7 would not be allowed to be operated in the future. So I know, I mean, most of you are probably concerned about your health. How is this impacting me? What did we look at as part of our review considering that? So pollutants, what's in the air that we're reviewing can be put into different classifications and categories. And we have different ways of measuring what kind of impact they would have on the public. So the first classification we call criteria pollutants includes like nitrogen oxide, those particulate PM10, PM2.5. FYI, the letters just mean sizes, and particulate is like dust. And we look at those according to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And in this case, we did computer dispersion modeling to screen those. I'm going to try not to geek out too much here. But computer dispersion modeling is basically like simulating monitors in a grid around the facility, like all over the place, so many feet apart, in your house, around your house, just all over the place, and saying, if we had monitors there, what would we be seeing for concentrations? And I have included the results in table 4 of the technical fact sheet, but to summarize that they did pass all of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Now, the other grouping of pollutants fall under the toxic screenings that we look at with Michigan Rule 225. There's different methods for screening toxics and just assessing that. So I apologize. I have a little bit sinus issues right now. So we did screen those, and we talk in more depth in the technical fact sheet as well about the methods that we used for that. But all of the toxics did pass the screening levels. So the health-based standards are shown to be met as long as the company follows the proposed permit conditions. Now, Monica Brothers is the district inspector, and she's going to discuss how Eagle determines if a company is meeting their permit conditions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Brothers, and I am the air quality inspector for Graphic Packaging and also the rest of Kalamazoo County. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our inspection and complaint processes. So Graphic Packaging will continue to be inspected at least every other year, as they have been in the past. And additional inspections may be done in response to odor complaints. During an inspection, an inspector determines compliance with any permits that the facility might have, and also other state and federal regulations. So typically what I first do when I go out for an inspection is that I will take a drive around the facility and see if I can smell any odors. If I do smell odors, I will assess those and try to trace them back to an origin. Another thing that we can do while we're driving around the facility is taking a look at their stacks on their roofs of all their buildings. And what we're looking for there is just anything other than steam coming out of their stacks. And then once we do that, we will arrive at the facility, and we will do a thorough walkthrough of the facility and take a look at all their processes and any pollution control equipment that they might have at the facility. The second portion of an inspection is to look at records. So like Amber was talking about, their permits will require them to keep records of certain materials that they're using, or certain emissions that they may have. And I take a look at those records and make sure they are complying with those conditions in their permit. Recently, Graphic Packaging has been inspected just back in August of 2020, and it was determined to be in compliance with their permit at that time, except for the odor issues that have been an ongoing issue. So speaking of odors, yeah, we have had a number of odor complaints in the recent past, and if I cite them for a violation, it would be under this rule. This is our Michigan state rule for nuisance odors, and this is Rule 901. So if I cite them for a violation, it would be under B, or it has been in the past, for unreasonable interference with the comfortable enjoyment of life and property. So that means that that's one of the reasons why we don't do drive-by complaints, because if you're just driving by, that's not necessarily interfering with the comfortable enjoyment of your life and your property. So if you make a complaint, it should be from, either your place of business or where you live. Next slide, please. So how do we determine if an odor is a violation of Rule 901? We have to take into account these three things: intensity, duration, and frequency of the odor. So typically if I get an odor complaint, I will drive out to where the complaint was made, and I will assess the odors and take into account those three things. If I detect an odor, I will try to trace it back to a particular facility, or even go further and try to figure out where it's coming from within the facility. If we do write a violation notice for it, the company has an opportunity to respond and tell us how they will mitigate those issues going forward. How do we determine if an odor is objectionable enough to violate Rule 901? The intensity scale that we use is a 0 to 5 scale. And you can see You can see that over here on the right side. And any odors above a level 3 or higher could be considered a violation, depending also on how long those odors last and how frequent those odors are. So because of the odor issues at the facility and the various violation notices we have written to the facility for odors, we did end up escalating them to our enforcement team in July of 2019. During the initial enforcement meeting, Graphic Packaging agreed to do an odor study to help determine where the odors were coming from within their facility. So this study began this summer and has been done by a third-party company, RK and Associates, and they just finished up the sampling portion of that study in early September. So as a part of this sampling portion of this study, they took samples at various locations around the facility 3 times a week for 60 days. So they had 5 perimeter locations just outside of their facility line, and then also 19 other community locations where they took these samples. So the sampling consisted of using a scintometer to use, which measures the intensity of an odor if an odor was present. And they also used portable hydrogen sulfide monitors to measure the hydrogen sulfide levels in the area. If an odor was present, they tried to trace it back to an origin and also tried to describe what that odor smelled like. In addition to these, they also took 9 bag samples at suspected odor sources in and around the plant. And those samples will be analyzed by a lab to characterize and determine the intensity of those odors. They will be submitting a final report of this odor study to us in early November. And then they will have to submit to us also an odor minimization plan based on the results of this study to us in early January. That's something that we will approve. So when we get the odor study, we can read through it and review it and make some tweaks if necessary. In addition to this odor study, Graphic Packaging has also recently installed 10 hydrogen sulfide monitors around the facility to continuously monitor H2S levels and to gather more data for their odor minimization plan that they have to submit to us. They're planning to install 6 more of these monitors in the near future. The enforcement process, like I said, is still ongoing. So we will use the results of this odor study to guide us on how we go forward in that process. So if you are experiencing odors, you can give me a call directly. That's my contact information on the screen there. If you have a complaint to make about odors outside of regular business hours, you can call the Pollution Emergency Alerting System. And that's a 1-800 number, 1-800-292-4706. And I would encourage anyone who's experiencing odors to contact me as soon as possible because like I said before, I need to be able to come out and corroborate what you're smelling in order to assess the odors and potentially write a violation. So with that, I'll pass it back to Jennifer for the question and answer session.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. So folks on the phone, I know we're talking about phone numbers and things like that. So we will repeat those numbers a little bit later. If you want to go ahead and grab a pen and a piece of paper if needed, that's also probably a good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and go share back to my other screen again. And I apologize for kind of the switching over here. So if my panelists want to go ahead and turn their cameras back on, that would be wonderful. We're going to get to the Q&A session here in just a second. So as we talked about before, you want to just go ahead and, sorry, that's comment period. Sometimes my hands get a little bit sticky there. If you have any questions about what we heard or what we talked about with you so far this evening, it looks like we've got about 20 minutes or so to go over some Q&A. We're just going to take those questions typed into the question and answer box. at the bottom of the screen. So I don't have any questions right now, but hopefully we'll get some. You guys gave a lot of really good information, and I'll definitely be reading off some of the contact information, like I said, and after we get done with the comment period here later. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a question, and it looks like there's a little bit of information, and then there is a question at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and read it for my panelists here. All right, so it says H.A. et al. 2019, so I'm assuming that's some sort of a paper, suggests that prenatal and early life exposure to ambient air pollution led to an increased risk of failing any developmental domain. Specifically, children were 2 times more likely to fail their communication domain, which signifies that they will likely meet DSM-V criteria for autism spectrum disorder or other developmental disabilities. The average cost of autism spectrum disorder behavioral treatments can range from $30,000 to $120,000 annually in Kalamazoo. The pollutants from this plant directly impact the north side, where residents are lower income and predominantly people of color who are already at a disadvantage for healthcare. Will the company pay families impacted by the pollution directly, or will they rely on taxpayers' money to help the future generations impacted? So this is a really interesting question, and we don't, this obviously falls outside of our air permitting purview here, but it's a very interesting question. And I know that we do have some of our environmental justice employees that work for Eagle kind of listening in. So this is probably a question we'll have to get back to you on. I don't think that we would have information about if the company would be paying families or not, at least as far as this go. But like I said, if we might not be able to answer specifically all the questions you guys have tonight, but we'll definitely find out who can and get back to you. This question is going to probably, Keisha, I'm going to probably pass this one to you first, and then if you would like to pass it over to potentially Bill, that might be a good idea, but I'll let you guys kind of figure that out. So I'll go ahead and read this one. What are the possible nuisance odors and negative health effects of increasing the annual allowed emissions, such as volatile organic compounds and carbon monoxide? So those were 2 that Amber had talked about having increases if the permit were to be go forward and be approved. So Keisha, can you talk a little bit about that? And then if you want to pass it over to Bill, you can go ahead and do that.
Sure. That's a really important question. So around a number of those pollutants like carbon monoxide, those pollutants don't have an odor, a strong odor associated with them. And so we don't expect nuisance odors to increase because of those. As Amber spoke about in our review, we really focus on health-based screening levels and the health-based standards specifically for some of those pollutants like carbon monoxide. And when we did that evaluation, we found that the maximum levels that are predicted to reach the public, that those are still below those health-based standards. At the same time, because the situation is so complex, it's really important for folks to continue to contact Monica related to any sort of odors that they do suspect come from the facility, so that we can follow up on those. And Bill, I would be interested in passing the question along to you for additional feedback.
Okay, I think what I can tell folks is that the City of Kalamazoo and the Kalamazoo County Health Department has reached out to our agency, DHHS, to help them with investigating air quality in the area. So basically, the City of Kalamazoo is going to be doing some sampling, and this is air sampling, and this is separate from the odor study that Graphics Packaging is doing. Okay, they're going to be doing air sampling using both monitoring equipment as well as collecting grab samples and sending those off to a laboratory for analysis. So they're going to be collecting from monitoring points around the graphics packaging and Kalamazoo wastewater treatment facility in neighborhoods to the west and to the east. And what they'll do is they'll be collecting that data. Once we get that data, our agency will be looking at that information, and then we're going to take a look at it, and we're going to assess the data and determine if there's any potential public health concerns. Okay, so this is a evaluation assessment that's going to be done jointly with the City of Kalamazoo, the Kalamazoo County Health Department, and DHHS.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate you answering that for us. So this question is going to go to you, Amber. This is a good one, and I think it goes to that whole, a lot of the concepts that we talk about at our public meetings and even amongst ourselves sometimes are sort of foreign to other people outside of air quality. So the question is really good, and I like the beginning of it too. So it says, why would a company voluntarily apply to reduce their own emissions? Can you please explain the concept of opt-out again? Are they asking to increase their own emissions in one area but plan to decrease emissions in another area? And are they asking Eagle to increase the allowable emissions under the opt-out? So first, to maybe talk a little bit about how an opt-out permit or those facility-wide restrictions are many times used by companies to not have to comply with certain federal rules and regulations. And I don't know what the case is in this. There's different reasons why people do that, but that's not the question number one. There's a lot of questions in this one. I read all of them. So if you need to again, I can read them over, but start with, you know, what is an opt-out or what is a facility-wide, you know, permit like that?
Okay. So companies actually quite frequently request to have opt-outs, and there's different purposes for opt-outs, and there's different things you can opt out of. And hooray for remembering the term opt-out. But in this case, they were taking these restrictions so that the facility-wide emissions were less than the major threshold for PSD. If the facility had emissions greater than this threshold, then there are additional regulations that they have to, additional steps, basically, that they would have to go through in order to permit a project. And so they did not want to have to go through these additional steps. And so they took the facility-wide emissions down so that they were not subject to those. And
so the second part of that, so first you said PSD, and that's another acronym that we use all the time. And like Amber said, that stands for prevention of significant deterioration, which it's just a set of rules, which we really could probably, I think the last time we even did training on it, it was a few hours long. It's a very complicated concept that deals with levels of pollutants. And basically what the company said is we don't want to be up here and have to comply with those more stringent, harder to, you know, do regulations. We don't want to do that. We're happy to limit our emissions. And another reason a lot of times companies are coming in now to get opt-out permits is control equipment is getting better, technology is getting better, and so their actual emissions really are lower than some of those major sources or those larger sources of emissions. And so it makes sense for them to come in and get those lower limits in their permits. So the second part of that is, you know, is the company asking to increase their own emissions in one area and plan to decrease their emissions in another area? And I don't know if that means, and maybe you could elaborate on this question and asker, are you talking about at their same facility or at other facilities across, you know, their operating units, because they have them in different states as well? So if that's the case, we wouldn't know about it, but maybe you can talk about whether or not it's within the facility, Amber.
Yeah, so originally in the documents, the technical fact sheet, I figure that the public wants to, they're more concerned about emissions going up, right? So that table 1 was a table that included the part of this project that included emissions that were going up. So there are emissions going up over here while they're also requesting these other ones to go down over here. But what they're asking for is facility-wide, and like I said on that slide, even including the new stuff too, all of their emissions had to be below that threshold. And so that's why they're taking these additional restrictions. So facility-wide, they're asking for this to be capped under this certain amount. So that part is strictly going down, but they are, as I had on that table, it showed facility-wide where it was going up and down. So hopefully that answers your question. And you will get a copy of that, I believe, Jennifer, right?
Yep, we'll definitely do that. And the question was by other areas within the Kalamazoo facility. So that makes sense. Yep, that table that we talked about, and I realize, and I apologize that not everyone could see that, but there are certain pollutants, almost all of them, which are having emissions decreases. And then there's those few that were having emissions increases, which kind of leads us to the next question, which goes to the greenhouse gas increase, potential increase if this permit goes through. And the asker said, you know, I see a possible 42% increase in greenhouse gases. Can you talk about what that total amount of greenhouse gases look like relative to similar industrial facilities? So I don't know, Amber, if you've done quite a lot of permitting, and I don't know if you have sort of a sense of, you know, I know those greenhouse gas numbers, when we're looking at those, they seem so large when we look at them. So I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit.
Didn't I have a supplemental slide on that I sent you earlier?
Potentially, but I don't have it in front of me right now because I have these other two presentations in front of me.
Okay, sorry.
So I apologize.
All right. There is a website the EPA has, and I might be able to find it, but maybe while you're answering questions or something like that, that does show industry, and you can go by state and see where things rank. I'm trying to remember where this one ranked. I looked it up prior, and we had that discussion. Jennifer, do you remember what I said?
No, I'm so sorry. And if someone else on the panel does remember, you can feel free to chime in on that.
Because I had it on a slide that I had sent, but we had those technical issues. And so I was supposed to be hosting actually the main slides, and Jennifer took over for me because I was having issues at my normal office space. So anyway, perspective wise, there are much larger facilities in the state of Michigan for greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases are a concern on a global level. So it's wherever they are emitted, you know, for potential climate change. So it's not like, you know, local pollutant as much as some of the other ones that you're concerned about the concentration in the air that you're breathing. It's more of a pollutant on a global basis getting up in the atmosphere. And the other thing global wise, we also have to remember related to this project is that they are talking about using recycled paperboard. And so, I mean, potentially if they were going to be using new paper, that would be a lot more trees being cut down as well. So perspective wise, you know, I think that does play in a little bit too.
So we don't have any other questions. Just as a reminder, oh, I'm sorry, Amber, I apologize. I thought you,
No, it's okay.
I was filling in your pause there. Did you have something more you wanted to add?
No, I'm actually going to look for that slide. So
Okay, yeah, sure, that's perfect. And then definitely chime in. I don't have any other questions right now. So just as a reminder, if you have a question, please type it into your question and answer box on the bottom of your screen. And we'll definitely get to those. I know the greenhouse gas question is a really good one. And it's always, you know, I always even kind of do a little like, oh, when we see those numbers. But with the carbon dioxide equivalent, it's a little bit of a weird calculation that we have to do for that. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. Did you find it, Amber?
I did. I found it that quickly. And I don't know if I can project the slide up or what, but I can tell you the website. It's ghgdata.epa.gov/GHGP. And you can get access to the facility level information on greenhouse gas tool, or FLIGHT is the abbreviation. And if you look this up, in Michigan, graphic packaging is the 58th largest greenhouse gas emitter.
In Michigan.
So, in Michigan.
In Michigan. Okay. So can you just read the first part of that website again? It was,
Yes. So GHG data, so GHG data dot EPA dot gov slash GHGP.
so for folks that are on the phones that wanted to jot that down, that's also a good one. And when we send the follow-up email for this, we can also add some of those websites in as well. And just because I don't have any other questions in my question box, but as we get ready to start the public comment period, I did want to say I'll also share my email address or any of the panelists' email address. Folks on the phone, if you want to jot those down and you have access to email, or you want to just give us a call because you want some of this information that we're talking about tonight, we're happy to share that with you. If you have an email address that you'd like for us to provide you with updates on what's going on with this permit decision, we're definitely happy to do that as well. Just as a sort of some information for going forward, this is likely not the only public meeting we're going to be having for graphic packaging coming up. There's other things that we definitely want to be communicating with folks about. So if you're on the phone and you do have access to email, it typically is the easiest way for us to get a hold of you, the fastest, certainly. So if you would like to provide us with that, we would really like to be able to reach out to you directly and not necessarily rely on media coverage or other ways for you to access that information. We want to make sure that folks that are interested in this facility get that information in their hands as soon as possible. And we're happy to add you to that list. If you don't have access to email and you really just have a phone, that's also totally fine. We're happy to give you a call as well. I know for our March meeting, Amber actually ended up calling all the folks that she had heard were interested and inviting them to the meeting. So we can do that too. We have no problem doing that. I know this virtual world is a little bit different than what we're used to. So we're all sort of getting acclimatized to that as well. All right. So I think I dilly-dallied long enough. I try to do that just to make sure I give you guys time to ask other questions. And like I said earlier, definitely have time to do that with us individually later on. And I know we had that one question we weren't able to answer. So we'll try to get back to you on the answer for that one. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and panelists, if you guys want to turn your cameras off, and I'm just going to ask Marianne to turn hers on. So during the public comment period, we do things a little bit differently. We definitely want to be able to take verbal comment from folks that are on the phone. Public comment is a really big deal for us, so we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to do that. So you have some options here, and I just want to kind of go over them so folks know you don't have to speak verbally if you don't feel comfortable with that. A lot of people don't. That's completely fine. If you want to type some comments into the question box tonight, remember these are just comments, so we wouldn't be responding to them. You can feel free to do that, and I will read your comment out loud unless you write in there, do not read. If you don't want me to, that's fine as well. If you would like to speak out loud, I know we have one person with their hand up, so they're going to be the first person in line to make a comment when we get everything started. You just want to click that hand icon on the bottom of your screen that will raise your hand for us to be able to see that you would like to make a comment. If you are on the phone, this is really important. If you'd like to make a verbal comment, you just type in your phone *9. So once you type that in, that will raise your hand for us, and then we will be able to unmute you and give you the floor. So just to let folks know, we typically are allowing for 3 minutes for comments. So I'll go over this in a minute when I read this very boring opening statement to all of you. But we will give you 3 minutes. I'll try to give you kind of a 30-second wrap up your comments warning. Try not to butt in too much, but I want to let you know when you're getting close to that 3 minutes. And then we'll go from there. So like I said, if you want to type your questions into the question box or your comments into the question box, you can feel free to do that. Again, just as a reminder, the comment period is for you to give us your comments, and we won't be responding or answering any questions during this time. So with that, I'm going to officially start the public comment period, the hearing portion of this night. And I have to read a sort of boring statement to all of you to get things kicked off, but it does have some important information. So we'll get started, and then after that, we'll start calling names. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this public hearing. My name is Jennifer Dixon with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and I will be the hearing officer tonight. We have Marianne Dolahanty, Air Quality Division Director, listening in on this hearing, and she is the decision maker for this permit application. This hearing is for a permit to install for a synthetic minor opt-out and revised recycling paperboard project at Graphic Packaging International facility located in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I have some background information to share with you before we begin. The Air Quality Division is responsible for regulating sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impact on public health and the environment. The law governing those responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Before the company can proceed with the proposed changes, they must obtain a permit meeting the requirements of Michigan's air quality laws. This means the project must be capable of meeting state and federal emission standards, including health-based standards. The proposed permits must also contain conditions including emission limits and specific ways of operating the equipment to ensure these standards are met. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to give anyone interested in the proposed permit changes at Graphic Packaging an opportunity to provide information the department may use in deciding whether to approve the permit to install or if there are additional issues to consider. Please note the proposed permit to install is still in draft form. This does not mean the department has already made a decision. Instead, it reflects an initial technical review of the proposal. We hope having the details of the draft permit available will help you in providing comments. Everything in the draft permit remains open for comment and further consideration by the department, including whether the permit will be granted at all. The department can only use the information you provide if it relates to criteria the department must use in making a decision. For example, concerns related to local zoning, truck traffic, and noise are not within the department's authority. Some of you may want to simply express your support or opposition to the proposed project. We will be happy to make note of your position, but please understand the department is, by law, not allowed to base our decision on whether there is widespread support or opposition to the proposed project. This hearing is being recorded and your comments will be part of the information the department will consider in making its decision about the proposed project. The public comment period for the proposed permit began September 10, 2020 and will end at midnight on October 23rd, 2020. Additional information may be submitted through October 23rd, 2020 via written or verbal comment during this hearing, by email, or by voicemail. After the close of the public comment period, the decision maker will review all written and verbal comments received. All significant air quality related comments will be considered, at which point final decisions on the permit applications will be made by the decision maker. The decision maker may deny the permit, approve as drafted, or approved with amendments. If approved, the decision must specify which provisions of the draft permit, if any, have been changed in the final permit and the reasons for the change. In all three scenarios, all interested parties, including everyone who was on the original mailing list, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended this public hearing will be directly notified of the decisions. Included will be a letter from the decision maker regarding the decisions and, if applicable, the approved permit. You may submit a written comment at any time to the addresses we will provide later. You may also type the word comment into the question box and submit your comment. I will read all of your comments out loud unless you say do not read. If you would like to make a verbal comment, you may raise your hand and I will unmute your line so you can speak. We will limit your comment time to 3 minutes. I will do my best to address commenters in the order your hands were raised, but please bear with us as the technology has challenges with doing that. Department staff are here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your views on the proposed project and for us to listen to your comments. Thank you so much for your attention. I will now begin calling names of those who have indicated they would like to make a statement. So just as a little sidebar, if you are calling in forgot to mention this previously, and I apologize. If you're calling in, I'm going to call the last 4 digits of your phone number. Is how I will identify that I'm going to be unmuting you. So I just want to make sure that you know the last 4 digits of your number. I sometimes forget mine and think they're my husband's. So just to let you know that. We do have a couple hands raised, so I'm going to go ahead and get my timer started here and get ready to go. All right, so, and after I unmute you, if you can please state your name for the record, and then you can go ahead and start your comment. So Ms. Crawford, I have unmuted you, and you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready. Ms. Crawford, would you like to make a comment? I did unmute you, so you should be good to go. You just have to unmute yourself. There you go. Now you should be ready.
My name is Brandy Crawford Johnson. I am one of the many victims of the toxic poison exposure from the releases of Graphic Packaging and the Kalamazoo wastewater treatment plant. I am a homeowner in the Northside neighborhood located near both facilities. I recently found out that my neighborhood was purposely zoned near this hazardous area because of racism. I am the initiator and lead plaintiff in the class action lawsuit against Graphic Packaging for the exposure to these toxic gas odors. I've also spoken with many reporters about this poisoning nightmare. I have had meetings with many air enforcement officials, lawyers, environmental groups, DHHS, and environmental justice coordinators with EGLE and the EPA. This summer, I became aware of one of the worst environmental and civil rights injustices since the Flint water crisis by investigating these facilities through FOIA requests. I've had to uproot my family during a scary pandemic because of this air poison exposure and high levels of PFAS shown to be released into the water near these facilities. In 2009, an odor study was done by the Kalamazoo wastewater treatment plant, and it was found that the poison odor was high levels of highly toxic gas and chemicals being released from the malfunctions of the equipment on Graphic Packaging's and the wastewater treatment plant's properties above regulatory levels for safety. MDEQ, aka EGLE, was well aware of this report. You cannot play both sides when human health is at risk. In the years following, EGLE gave 8 written violations with no fines or enforcement to correct these issues. There's been no resolution for 11 years, causing residents to be continuously exposed to the toxins that can be contributed to many of our health issues. Graphic Packaging, the City of Kalamazoo, and EGLE knowingly and intentionally introducing life-threatening substances into an individual without their consent violates the right to bodily integrity. The officials thought through their decision-making. Air Quality Inspector Monica Brothers has admitted to me that these gases get trapped in our neighborhoods. EGLE has never put air monitors in the north side and east side residential neighborhoods despite hundreds of air complaints over the years from residents, doctors at Borges Hospital, and businesses. Not only has there been no strict enforcement or court orders to shut down these plants, EGLE has given Graphic Packaging several permits and grants while being out of compliance to increase global warming and further poison the public. Air enforcement officials by law have a duty of care and legal obligation to protect the public from foreseeable harm. Another odor study released in June of this year shows the same issues are still ongoing. This report even added that Graphic Packaging does not have a cap on their clarifier, which is exposing residents and employees to even higher amounts of hydrogen sulfide and other toxic chemicals. EGLE officials have failed to their duties to protect the public from these exposures and ensure we have safe air to breathe and that we would not be poisoned. Not only has EGLE officials and City of Kalamazoo officials failed in their duty to protect the public, they have lied and put up a smokescreen called an odor task force to deceive the public into thinking that they are trying to find the source of the odor when they have known since 2009 what the odor was and the harm it would cause to residents and employees.
Ms. Crawford, you have 30 more seconds, just
The
letting you
City
know.
of Kalamazoo in 2018 also sent a cease and desist letter to Adams Data Solutions, who collects air quality for the American Lung Association, because they give them a failing grade every year for air pollution. This permit should not be modified or granted, and Graphic Packaging and the wastewater treatment plant should be shut down immediately due to this public health emergency. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Mr. Aaron Wright, I am unmuting your line so that you can go ahead and make your comment. You can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Great. Yeah, good evening. My name is Aaron Wright. As the chair of the Environmental Concerns Committee for the City of Kalamazoo, I have attended multiple odor task force meetings. Now, I understand that what you're discussing here tonight is to approve or deny or modify this particular air quality permit. But what I'm discussing, I believe, is sort of materially relevant to this issue. I'm pleased at the progress being made by both the City of Kalamazoo and Graphic Packaging in monitoring current odors and planning for future odor mitigation efforts. There have been further questions from the community about the extent of gases emitted from City of Kalamazoo and Graphic Packaging properties beyond just the nuisance odor issues. Indeed, one member of the odor task force, Lewis Parker, who also sits on the Kalamazoo County Environmental Health Advisory Committee, works with an after-school group of students at Northeastern Elementary School in the East Side neighborhood of Kalamazoo. Where I used to live when I was a kid, we used to climb up, sneak up on the roof of Northeastern Elementary, but let's not let those kids know that. These students posed this question to him: is this smell going to make us sick? I am aware, after multiple discussions with city and state staff, that identifying and measuring odors or gases is a complicated matter. However, I strongly believe that the citizens of the affected areas deserve an answer to this basic question. I urge EGLE, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, EPA, the City and County of Kalamazoo, with cooperation from Graphic Packaging International, as well as any other relevant public agency, provide a definitive answer to the question: are these odors making us sick? The people of Kalamazoo deserve and demand an answer. Repeated public denials of the existence of any odor coming from Graphic Packaging by Graphic Packaging International, any odor coming from any of their processes or properties, leave the citizens of Kalamazoo with this additional question: if Graphic Packaging has denied the very existence of any odor emanating from their processes or properties, why would they acknowledge any negative health effects of these odors or gases? I was delighted to hear from the representative, Bill, I can't remember his last name, that it sounds like a health study is going forward. That sounds fantastic. So I appreciate everybody's effort here tonight and everybody's time. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for your comment, Mr. Wright. So I have one comment that was written in. I'm going to go ahead and read that. It is from Kristen Powell, and it says, please remember that the EPA has had significant rollbacks in regulations. Just because it is within the legal limits does not mean that it will not have negative impacts. DDT was legal until public outrage over carcinogenic bioaccumulate features of the toxic chemical. The Love Canal was literally built on toxic waste that killed the community's children. The EPA is not proficient enough to ensure that your safety is promised. Protect your neighbors, your families, and future generations from this toxic exposure. Thank you so much, Ms. Powell, for your comment. At this time, I don't have any other hands raised. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment on this proposed permit? I'll give you guys a couple seconds here to decide. Again, we will have other opportunities to provide comment. If you're not ready to do so tonight, please don't feel like you have to. There's other ways to provide written comments, which we will go over in just a couple minutes. Anyone on the phone, if you want to raise your hand, just remember you are going to click *9 to do that. Okay. At this time, I don't have any other comments being written into the comment box or any other hands being raised. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and officially close the public hearing. Remember, that does not mean that there's not still an opportunity to comment, and we'll go over a couple of those things in just a moment. So I have to read a closing statement to officially close the public comment, or I'm sorry, the public hearing, not the comment, the hearing. So thank you for taking the time to participate in tonight's meeting. We greatly appreciate your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, the public comment period will close at midnight on October 23rd, 2020. All interested parties, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended public meetings related to the proposed permit will be directly notified of final decisions. The hearing is now closed. Thank you so much again. The hearing is closed, but we still have a couple other things to go over. So if you still have some time and you're interested, I definitely would like to just go over a couple more things with everybody. I know I had talked about other ways that you can submit an official comment for the record. So if you weren't quite prepared to talk tonight, but you do feel strongly about some things in the proposed permit, please feel free to use any of these ways to do so. So because we have folks on the phone, I am going to read these out loud in case anyone wants to jot these down, but they're also available on our webpage. So you can mail written comments to Annette Switzer. She is our permit section manager. Her last name is spelled S as in Sam, W, I as in igloo, T as in Tom, Z as in zebra, E as in elephant, R as in red. She is again our permit section manager. The address for that is P.O. Box 30260, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7760. We're always happy to take comments via email. It's always great if you can put in the subject line at least graphic packaging so we know what permit you're commenting on. And that email address is eagle-ptipubliccomments@michigan.gov, and I'll spell that out for you as well. It's eagle, E as in eagle, E as in elephant, G as in good, L as in lion, E as in elephant, dash, A as in apple, Q as in queen, D as in David, dash, P as in Paul, T as in Tom, I as in igloo, P as in Paul, U as in umbrella, B as in boy, L as in lion, I as in igloo, C as in cat, another C as in cat. So the word comments all spelled out. So eagle-aqd-pti public comments, and then it's at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. You can also call our voicemail. We love it when people call our voicemail. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it's a great way for us to get public comment, and it gives you the time maybe you need to speak your comment aloud. So if you would like to call and leave us a comment on voicemail, you can call 517-284-0900. And also if you're on the phone and you really would just like to leave us your email address so that we can send you information about this permit action, you can go ahead and call that number as well and just leave us a message and just say, hey, here's my email address, I want to be included. So there's a lot of other information about this proposed action that's already online if you're interested in that. We have something called the proposed project summary, which is just a really sort of high level talk about what the company is proposing in this permit application. The technical fact sheet, Amber referred to that a lot. It is a lot more detailed information than what you would find in the proposed project summary. It really digs into pretty much every rule and regulation that the team looked at when they were evaluating this permit application and developing the proposed permit. So it can be technical. Again, we are happy to answer questions about this. If you're reading it and you're like, Jennifer, I have no idea what you all are talking about in this thing, definitely give us a call and we're happy to talk to you about that as well. You can find the proposed permit terms and conditions, and then we'll also link the recording of this meeting tonight on there once it's ready as well. So the easiest way to get to that is just to go to michigan.gov/air, and then you're going to click on permits and then look for permits public notice for PTIs. Again, if you have any issues finding these things online, just give us a call and we're happy to help you get there. Oops, sorry about that. On the screen right now is just a bunch of folks' information that you heard from the panel tonight. We've got Amber on there, Monica, Susan Kilmer, we didn't get to hear from her, but again, she does our air monitoring. So those are the stations around the state that kind of pull in outdoor air and give us information about that. Steph Hangspot, she is the one that does air modeling. Amber did refer a little bit to that about the grid of the fake computer simulations that kind of look at what do we expect as far as levels of emissions in certain areas. So she can definitely talk about that. And then you did hear from Keisha tonight to talk about toxics information. So if you have questions about that. So I'm not going to read all of those folks' information out loud. Again, if you're calling in, what I will do is give you Monica's number one more time. And then if you have questions of anything that she can't answer, she can definitely direct you to the right person. So Monica's number, especially if you have odor complaints or concerns related to the facility, her number is 269-312-2535. And then I wanted to give you that pollution emergency number again. Monica does, have sort of regular business hours like most of us do. But if you have issues after regular business hours, so after 5 o'clock, you can also call the PEAS line. We call it the PEAS line, and it's a 1-800 number. And that number again is 1-800-292-4706. So that will get you to an operator who will take your complaint and get it to a staff person who can respond if necessary. So that being said, I just want to thank you all again. And I know we all thank you for joining us tonight, realizing that this is probably not how you wanted to spend your Thursday evening. But we really appreciate you taking the time, and especially folks who took the time to make comments tonight. I know that's sometimes a nerve-wracking thing, and so we greatly appreciate it. We'll definitely be getting a hold of you soon as far as what's going on with the facility and the proposed permit. You'll hear about that, and we'll send you some information about the recording for the meeting once those closed captions are up and ready to go. So with that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening, and we look forward to talking to you soon.